Who was Moondog?
So Moondog was actually Louis Thomas Harden, and he was also known as the Viking of 6th Avenue, and he's probably one of the most prolific underground street performers, composers, instrument inventors, and musicians in the 20th century. His story is quite fascinating, actually, because he came from humble beginnings in the Midwest, and he was blinded as a teenager in a dynamite blasting cap accident. So he found this cap in a field, and he was like, oh, playing around with it when he was a teenager, and it happened to be a blasting cap. It went off, blinded him. So he was permanently blinded around age 16 or 17. Prior to that, he had some musical background. He played drums in high school. The first drum set he had was a cardboard box when he was 5. But for him, when he was really young, his parents were missionaries, and he would attend a lot of native tribal dances around the Midwest, and for a while they lived in Wyoming in the Southwest. And when he was 5, he attended an Arapaho tribal dance, and Chief Yellowcalf put Moondog on his knee and let Moondog play the tom-tom drum. And that seems to be a real sort of life-changing experience for Moondog, because that's really, when you get down to it, the influence of the Native American tribes and their dances, I think that's really the essence of them, especially when you talk about his Snaketime rhythm, which we can get into.
When you say Moondog, even amongst jazz fans, who do they think of?
Moondog is, I think, best known as an obscure New York street performer who was this imposing 6-foot-plus figure who would dress as a Viking, and literally he was camped out all day, all night at the corner of 54th and 6th Avenue. So he was right around the corner from Birdland, right around the corner from Carnegie Hall, and because of that, he would, Carnegie Hall musicians, they became aware of him. They persuaded the conductor to let him sit in on rehearsals. Apparently that's where he learned orchestration, and he must have had amazing ears, which is, as I understand, when you're blind, your other senses are really heightened. I mean, he sat in on Leonard Bernstein's first conducting performance. He knew Charlie Parker. Apparently Charlie Parker suggested that they played together, but unfortunately Bird died before the session was booked. Dylan has written a poem about him. Janis Joplin covered one of his songs. Steve Reich and Philip Glass, they credit Moondog as being one of the originators of minimalism, which, as I understand it, Moondog doesn't, he denies that, because Moondog's not really a minimalist, but a lot of his music sounds, a lot of his later period stuff sounds minimalist, but it's just what happens when you combine the influences of Moondog's music, which the main influences in his music, the cyclical percussive rhythms of the Native American tribes and dances that he attended when he was a child, sitting on the lap of Chief Yellow Calf and playing the tom-tom drum. He was also obsessed with the music of Bach, Beethoven, and Brahms. He wrote over 300 madrigals. He really loved writing in canons and rounds, and he studied that at schools for the blind after he had his blinding accident when he was a teenager. So it's sort of a combination, his styles of the rhythmic stuff, but the classical stuff, and then also the street sounds of New York. So all of that kind of went into this style. It's kind of hard to pin him down because he's staggeringly prolific as a composer, not only in terms of a vast range of styles. Some of his stuff is minimalist, some of his stuff is avant-garde, some of his stuff is like beatnik jazz, some of it's a little mingusy. He's got a big band record. He's got a record where it's all pipe organ stuff, but it's new music on the organ, experimentation with just different range things. Some of his music is like meditation music. Some of it is just really classical, modern classical stuff. But he does interesting stuff, like he juxtaposes that with like a big band. He sort of describes himself as basically a European in exile. And he's saying that his music, rhythmically, he's considered to be in the present, even avant-garde, but in terms of melodically and harmonically, he's very much in the past. And that is true. Like with his big band stuff, with his jazz stuff, you're never going to hear really dissonant, disjunct, atonal sort of melodies like you'll hear in Herbie Hancock or Chick Corea, or anything like that. And you're not going to hear really sophisticated harmony like you'll hear, with those guys. Nothing like that. The harmony is very more, and the melody as well. It's a lot more conventional, a lot more, really coming out of Bach, Beethoven, and Brahms. But the rhythms, especially with the Snaketime rhythm, which to me is that's his defining element. That's his greatest contribution to music, is his Snaketime rhythm, which is basically, in the way he describes it, is a slithery rhythm in times that are not ordinary, so odd times. And then he says he's quoted as saying he's not going to die in 4/4. So what I think is, because he grew up, and he went to a lot of these Indian reservations and attended a lot of these dances, and he spent some time in his life when he was a kid in Wyoming. I think it's really emblematic and sort of signifies like the sound of a rattlesnake. But really what it is it's basically just odd rhythms, and one that he particularly really uses a lot is 5, especially with a grouping of, the 2/3. Here we have Moondog Symphony, Part 1 from 1949, using the 5/4-3/2 grouping, Snaketime rhythm. Oasis from 1954, 3-1-2-1-2-3, 1-2-1-2-3. Witch of Endor from 1969. 2-3-1-2-1-2-3, 1-2-1-2-3, 4-5. In his New York period, and in terms of the stuff that I recommend for his discography, his New York period was from 1943 to 1974. So he lived in New York City then, and there's some early stuff, some early recordings, some singles, stuff like that. Moondog Symphony, which is in the recording, which is one of his early stuff. So he's, kind of fleshing out his ideas. He's got experimenting with some of his homemade instruments that he has. But in the New York period, he did 3 records for Prestige, which is really kind of like the refinement of everything that he did prior to that, like from when he got to New York in 43 up until the Prestige records, which was 56 and 57. The 3 albums were recorded. Everything from 1943 up into that, it's really exemplified in the Prestige, because it's Prestige, it's a major jazz label in the 50s, of course, and just the arrangements, the recording quality is the best for that. So, he was literally in the cutting edge musical center of the universe for 30 years. He was standing 6th and 54th, So you think about late 40s into the 50s, very conservative America then, very conventional, very, very conformist. And then out of the blue, here's this 6 foot plus, I think he was like 6'4", blind guy, dressed as a Viking with a Viking helmet, standing with a spear and with a cloak, standing 8 hours a day on the corner of one of the busiest intersections in the world, right? Playing his instruments, selling his, so people would see him all the time. So he was like he was a tourist attraction, and he made his money by selling his music. He would sell his poetry. He would, sometimes he would sell some of his instruments. He would do most of his composing, and I mean like ornate, intricate composing, rounds, canons, stuff like that, polyphonic stuff. He would do it away from the piano, but he would go and run through it on the piano. So he had some piano chops. So the Prestige records, there's 3. There's Moondog, which is 56, More Moondog, which is I think also late 56, and then Moondog Story, which is 57. And that's all kind of the same period. So in that, you hear him on piano, recorder. He plays some of his invented instruments, the oud, the Trimba. The oud is a triangular 25 string harp that's played with a wooden, like a clav, it's actually a wooden pistol that like a pharmacist would have, to break up stuff. And this is, so the early period, right? So Fog on the Hudson. Right, and this is not in, this is one of his, this is pre-Prestige, so it's not one of my recommended albums, because I think these 3 Prestige albums, they exemplify his early period. He had his own label, I think it was called like Snaketime Sounds, and then he was on some like singles that were, like Moondog Symphony is on a single. But so Fog on the Hudson is a solo with an oud and 4/4, and you can hear the foghorns of ships in the Hudson in the background. That's from a record called On the Streets of New York, 1953. He was also on some Folkways stuff, some Tony Schwartz stuff for sure. Later, when he moved to Europe, he married a woman and he lived with her family, and she managed all of his she basically managed, she was like his manager. 74, he relocated to Germany, and this is a really prolific period. The albums that he did then were much more complex, much more involved, overdubbing, sampling, large orchestras. Wow. He did a record with the London Saxophonic. He did a big band record, and both of those records also have choruses too. So like a lot more big productions with the Europe stuff. So the Columbia period, Moondog 1 was 69, Moondog 2 was 71, and a lot of that stuff is, again, so with that you have, that was a lot more popular, very hippie-ish, very kind of, some of it sounds a little bit like, the Yellow Submarine. And this is Moondog 1 and 2, which is Columbia, 69 and then 71. Way more polished in the performance, recording production, way more orchestral. There's a beautiful piece called Pastoral. Where an instrument that he invented called the troubadour harp, which is basically a smaller portable harp that you could carry around. It's like 20 pounds, you could play it on your knees. And the thing that's cool about it is you could put guitar strings on it. So it was like, you could go anywhere, you get guitar strings anywhere, right? Harp strings, I have no idea. I couldn't tell you where to get it. I mean, he appeared on stage with Lenny Bruce. He was championed by Stravinsky, Lester Young, and Zappa. Now, when he moved to Germany, yeah, I mean, that period was just, the records there, I mean, you have, and there's quite a few. The ones that I've indicated are, well, actually, chronologically, New Sounds on an Old Instrument, which is all for pipe organ. Marvelous stuff. Elpmas, which is samples spelled backwards. He would do stuff like that. He would take words, and he would tell people he was from Sasnak when they asked him on the street, which is Kansas, spelled backward. I mean, on Elpmas was, that was 91. So he would use samples on that. They sample Rainforest on that.
So he was recording that late.
Yeah. So yeah, his German period is 74 to 99. And again, really prolific, albums much more complex. So most of the settings, especially the larger orchestral ones, his role as an instrumentalist will be playing either his large hexagonal drum, which he devised, which was reminiscent of the tom-tom drums that he experienced as a kid. And it, you know, he'll be doing that. Or the Trimba, which is a series of triangular drums of varying different sizes, also called dragon's teeth. So when he's playing along with a big band on his big band record, which is one of his last in '94, or with the record with the London Saxophonic,
right.
You know, on those he's mostly playing drums, or maybe he'll sing a little bit of, like if there's a choral part, he'll do that. You know, he's not really playing, because there at that level, when he was in Germany, he's working with really polished conservatory musicians. Because I want them to know it's more than just this dude and a Viking. Like, there's so much more. So Wind River Powwow, and also Marimba Mondo 1. These are from Elpmas, 1991. Now this record was fascinating because there were 5 separate bands on this record, and that leads to a longer piece which I didn't include. This is sort of a primer to it, called Cosmic Meditation. And it sounds like meditation music. The fact that he's got 4 separate bands in that album, and the marimbas and the percussive quality to it. For example, Marimba Mondo 1. To me, it really sounds like Steve Reich, you know, a lot of it. And then you also have the album Bracelli, which was in '86. So he's introducing a new type of string quartet here. 2 violins, 2 cellos with contrabass, and then Moondog playing on his Trimbas, again, the triangular drums. So he's just sort of playing percussion on his compositions along with this new type of string quartet. I would say some of it is very Copland-esque to me with the strings, which I think is pretty fascinating. The last 2 records that I have, which are very similar, so Sax Pax for a sax, and also his tribute to NYC, New Amsterdam. His rhythms were the most sophisticated part about him, but his harmonies and his melodies, especially when we're talking about his big band writing and his more jazz stuff, it's more traditional. He loved, you know, Bach, Beethoven, and Brahms.